Welcome back to the Making the Madness YouTube channel. Sean back again for another video on NBA draft related news with big impact on college basketball. Jeff Goodman reported earlier today that Duane Washington Jr., the 16-point per game scorer from Ohio State, is staying in the NBA draft rather than returning to Ohio State for his senior season. He shot 37% from deep last year, had 18 points in the NCAA tournament, lost to Oral Roberts. And that's going to be big time news because Ohio State, even with Duane Washington Jr., had some questions at the guard spot. Because it would have been Jamari Wheeler, the transfer from Penn State, who's a high level on ball defender, coming in, and he would have started at the 1 with Duane Washington Jr. at the 2. But Wheeler's not much of a scorer. And when you look at the rest of the roster, you have Meechie Johnson, who's a sophomore. Last year he came in as a freshman. He played half the season. It was one of those reclassification situations. But last year, since the year was so weird, I believe his high school season was canceled, so he just came to school early. And then Malachi Branham, who went to the same high school as LeBron James, is now coming in. He's a 6'5" shooting guard. But there's going to be a ton of opportunity for those two to step in right away and have big minutes. I mean, you look at what Meechie Johnson was able to do last season. In a limited role, he showed promise, just wasn't very consistent. But that's what you expect from a guy his age. He was super young last year, and he tried out for the U19 team, didn't make it. He played 5 minutes a game last year in 17 games, went 6 for 12 from 3, but the talent was pretty evident when he did play. When he got his minutes, you could tell that there was something there, and Meechie Johnson's going to be a big player, but there is going to be a lot dependent on what he does this season. He's a real X factor for Ohio State, because there's just not a lot of scoring guard-wise on this team. You have Jimmy Soto's a Bucknell transfer. He didn't do much last year, but he was a really good shooter at Bucknell. Maybe he gets a little more run this year. Justin Arns is pretty much just a spot-up shooter, and he's more of a wing anyways, but he's just that kind of guy that's going to shoot threes. He's going to make a ton of them. He's one of the best shooters in college basketball, but that's all he does. He's not going to drive. He's not going to put the ball on the floor. He's not going to be the kind of guy that can go get a bucket at the end of the game if someone's not making it for him. He needs a point guard that's able to create for him. Last year, Arns shot 4.3 shots per game, and 4.1 of them were three-pointers. He shot only 7 shots that weren't threes. So that shows you exactly what his game is. But when you look at the rest of the roster, assuming E.J. Liddell is back, which seems pretty likely at this point, he's going to be a potential first-team All-American, potential Big Ten Player of the Year. He's a real important player on the team. Duane Washington Jr. was very important, but E.J. Liddell is fantastic. He can hit shots from the mid-range. He's very tough to stop. He's 6'7", but plays much bigger, and I think he's going to improve his three-point jumper quite a bit next season should he return, which I think is likely at this point. Justice Suing, the forward, was solid last year, the transfer from Cal after sitting out a year. Seth Towns, the transfer from Harvard, he played a little bit last year. It was up and down, but he hadn't played in 2 calendar years after his injuries at Harvard. I think he could be a pretty solid piece this year. Shot 34% from deep last year, but in only 10 minutes per game. I think Towns this year could step in and play a much bigger role, and I hope that's the case because he is just supremely talented. It's just injuries really killed him. I mean, he was the Ivy League Player of the Year in 2017, 2018 for a reason. Averaged 16 points per game, shot at almost 45% from deep. He's very gifted, and he's going to have opportunity to produce for this team next season. But where this team's going to be able to win games is with the front court. You have Kyle Young back for the extra year of eligibility. He could throw up a double-double any night. E.J. Liddell, he's the best player on the team. He can drop 20 any night, assuming he's back. Zed Key could be a solid breakout candidate. Like I just mentioned, Seth Towns. You have Justice Suing, who's more of a combo forward, but he adds a lot on the defensive end, and he's pretty versatile on the offensive end, too. I like what Justice Suing brings to the table. And, that's going to be what ends up... And you can't forget about Joey Brunk. I don't think he's going to play very much, maybe like 10 minutes a game. He's just going to add size and can rebound a little bit. But Ohio State, I had them 17th in my rankings that I did about 2 or 3 weeks ago with Duane Washington Jr. and E.J. Liddell back. Without Duane Washington, I'm going to have them closer to the back end of my top 25, probably 23, 24. They're going to be near the back end of it because there's just not guards on this team that I trust right now. That could change with how Malachi Branham and Meechie Johnson play early in the season, but at the moment, I just don't trust what these guards are going to be able to do because they lose a 16 point per game score and they didn't really add anybody to replace him. They had opportunities to add guys that could replace Duane Washington Jr. if they thought he was going to leave, and it seems like that's the way things were trending for a while. Just based on reading things, it seems like Duane Washington Jr. kind of planned on leaving the past month or two potentially. But there was guys that they could have added. Jamari Wheeler's a solid add. He's, like I said, great defender, can shoot the ball from three a little bit, but he's, again, not that. He's like Kihei Clark in a lot of ways at Virginia. He's not the guy that's going to go get a shot at the end of the game, but he's a guy that can set the table. He can defend at a high level. He's a good piece that can play 25 minutes a game, but he's not going to be the Duane Washington Jr. kind of guy that can go get a bucket at the end of the game. He's just not that kind of guy, and Ohio State is really missing that guy, and unless Meechie Johnson or Malachi Branham can step up to be that guy as super young players, Ohio State could be in for an interesting season because guard play is always what I say wins you national championships. You look at last year, Baylor, they had such good guards. They had Davion Mitchell, they had Jared Butler. Both are probably first round picks. I mean, Mitchell's going to be a lottery pick. I'd assume Butler's a first round pick. And Maceo Teague, Adam Flagler, that's such good guards. And that's just how you win championships. Guard play is what can carry teams. Forward play is always good too, but guard play always helps out forwards. When you have good guards, they can help out forwards. They complement each other well. And like I said, I just don't trust these guards on Ohio State at the moment. I would probably have Michigan, Purdue. I'll probably put Indiana over Ohio State at this point in my rankings. And then, a couple other teams in the mix, like Michigan State. I don't think they're that far away from being ranked ahead of Ohio State in my rankings either. I mean, it's going to be tough to trust this team entering next season, and they have an early season meeting with Duke in the ACC Big Ten Challenge. I almost said championship, in the ACC Big Ten Challenge, which is going to be an interesting game because Duke's probably going to be a consensus top 10 preseason team, and Ohio State would have probably been a consensus top 10 preseason team if Duane Washington Jr. was back. But now that's going to be a big game early in the season for Ohio State. They'll be trying to find their identity. They're going to be trying to figure out which guards can step in right away and play a big role. And that could be a very tough game for the Buckeyes. But that's going to be one to watch early in the season to see what this team is made of. They're still a ranked team for me, assuming E.J. Liddell is back. If he's not, they're definitely not going to be ranked for me. But at the moment, it's going to be curious to see what they bring out. They're ranked for me. And next year, it's going to be an interesting team to watch because they need to find out who can step in and get buckets because right now they just don't really have that guy. Like and subscribe, and until next time, have a good one.